Are we loaded? There we go. We're loaded on the tubes. Also, hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Obviously, those on the tubes, these are fan funded only. I'm going to be covering topics that I want to cover in these, but I'm not going to be reading comments unless they happen to be paid comments from super chats. But I'm probably not going to read them out loud. But I'll see them at least. But back over to the point, I just want to cover basic topics while I live stream that I want to talk about while streaming on both platforms. Good for my outreach, good for my algorithm. Today, I want to talk about just Second Amendment responsibilities based kind of what we saw with the Alex Pretti thing. None of this video is about whether he deserved to be shot. Okay. Not the topic. That's its own separate topic. And that's a very complex legal topic. That is not the conversation. But what we do need to talk about, again, is I'm a Second Amendment guy. I'm a guy who carries. I'm very big on basic responsibilities and rules when we choose to carry. I am an absolutist when it comes to the Second Amendment, meaning I do not believe in restrictions at all. I do believe that every American citizen who is free out on the street, like they are not in prison, should have a legal right to possess and carry firearms. That's how I feel about it. I am an absolutist on the Second Amendment. I'm even one of those that says, hey, if they have committed a felony, should their rights be restored? Well, if they're safe enough for you to let out of prison, then the answer is yes. If they're too dangerous to own a piece, don't let them out of jail. They're not rehabilitated enough to put on the street because they could get a car, a crowbar, or anything else. So I do tend to be an absolutist. So, when it comes to this, when you take someone like Alex, if you say, did he have a right to carry? Well, yeah, obviously. He's an American citizen. He was an American citizen who was not in a prison at the time or in a mental institution. I think that's pretty straightforward. But as far as responsibilities go, I think it raises the point that we have to talk about and understand that when you choose to exercise the right to carry, it's not something that should be done lightly. It's not a small deal, and you have to have basic responsibilities. We have to think through the situations we put ourselves into and understand there are consequences to ourselves and to others. And the reason is all firearms are deadly weapons, all of them. They have the potential to kill. Hopefully everyone understands this. Therefore, because you are choosing to exercise your right to carry a deadly weapon, you have a basic responsibility to think through the situations you put yourself into. We need to think about that in terms of conflicts we put ourselves into. Are we out here putting ourselves in a situation to where someone is going to die? We have to think about this stuff. It's kind of important. I'd say it's near the top of the importance list because, again, you're carrying a gun. Okay? You have a basic moral responsibility to be responsible. And so what that means is you need to be de-escalating. In other words, when you carry a gun, you should not be putting yourself into situations where you get into unnecessary conflicts with anybody. Now, doing it with law enforcement is doubly stupid, but doing it with me would be stupid, someone who you know is carrying, right? If you choose to carry and you get yourself into altercations of screaming or yelling or any situation to where another person who you know is armed may feel like you're a threat, and then they know that you have a piece or they see it, it gets flashed, this turns deadly. This can turn deadly extremely fast because someone else now sees you as a threat who knows that you have a gun. We understand that's all we need. In most places, like where I live, you've made yourself a threat to somebody to where they feel that you are an immediate violent threat, and then they know that you have a gun because you are screaming at them, advancing on them in a threatening manner, and your piece flashes. your shirt lifts up. Even if you're concealed carrying, they see it. They know you're printing. They might, in many cases, be able to go ahead and pop you at that point. Like, well, now I feel that he's becoming violent with me. He's a threat. I saw the gun. Good lawyer, they're not going to go to, they're going to be found innocent if they pop you at that point. And I'm not even talking about the police. I'm talking about Joe Smo, Billy Bob Jumpback walking down the street with his grandpappy's 1911 on. Then you need to be a police officer. So do you see what I mean of putting yourself in these violent situations? Or the same thing, you get cocky because you're carrying and you find yourself in altercations where you again get into a yelling match with another human being. Okay. You've now escalated a situation to where you may need to draw because you couldn't keep your cool. All right. This is bad. This is not only stupid, it's irresponsible. So that's what I mean by not put yourself into these situations. You do not put yourself in conflicts you do not need to be in. And that doubly holds true once you choose to carry. Because once you get into a screaming match, a yelling match, a possible fist fight, when you're carrying a gun, the odds that somebody is dying is going way up at this point. And it could have been avoided. It could have been completely avoided. You didn't need to get mad at the guy who cut in front of you in line or cut in front of you at a car, honked his horn at you. You see what I mean? You didn't need to do all that. Okay. This is what we mean by having a basic responsibility with these things. Don't put yourself into stupid situations that can turn violent when you choose to carry. Because again, if they do, and you have your piece, you're now justifying the odds of them drawing their piece. Or even if it's unjustified, the odds still go up. Even if they're found guilty, you still got 2 in the chest. Didn't work out too well, did it? So this is what you have to think about. We have to think about these responsibilities when we choose to carry of stupid, idiotic situations that we find ourselves in. Okay, and this is what you're taught in most classes on this stuff. These are the things that we have to consider. You know, same thing when you're going to stuff like protests. Are you at a legal protest? I'm not talking about a riot. Are you legally under the Second Amendment and the First Amendment allowed to wear a holstered firearm at a protest? Yes, you are. It's protected right. We all agree. However, it's also a degree of risk. Okay. Why? How quickly do these situations turn volatile? Pretty decent chance. Okay. You're potentially putting yourself in a situation, albeit maybe small, where somebody's getting popped. Not always a smart choice. Not saying you don't have a right to do it. You need to assess stuff very, very carefully. And the same problem we run into with all of this that people forget too. When you choose to carry, you're held to a higher standard legally, and people forget that. People say, well, what do you mean? You resist arrest. And let's say the police get the cuffs on you, they take your gun away or whatever. You hit a police officer, you hit another man while wearing your piece. That accelerates the level of criminal offense. And people have to remember that too. Okay. If you break the law, any law, while wearing your gun, in most situations, there are exceptions, the penalty is higher. Right? Third degree felony can turn into a second degree. A second degree felony can turn into a first degree because you did so while armed. You did so while carrying a gun. And people also forget that when you're in the commission of a crime, you don't have a right to self-defense. So people also don't factor that in. They're like, well, I have this. Yeah, but you were committing a crime already. The courts don't recognize self-defense. At least it's state by state. But like where I live, Texas, if you are committing a crime and you draw your gun and use it, the state will not recognize that you had a right to self-defense. Even if the other person was going to kill you, they don't recognize your right to self-defense. They're like, you have to die. Because you can't use self-defense in court for homicide if you were in the commission of another crime while doing it. In other words, you're stalking somebody. They draw their gun, you draw their gun. They draw first, you defend yourself. You're still getting a murder charge. Why? Because you don't have a right to self-defense while committing a crime. You have no legal right to it. You broke into their house. Well, you're not legally allowed to defend yourself. It's called murder. You hit them first. You committed an assault. You got into a scuffle, fist fight, a pushing match. The other person draws down. If you draw down and successfully end it first, you're still going to be found guilty of murder. Why? Because you were in the process of committing another crime when you tried to defend yourself. It's not recognized as self-defense. You have no right to self-defense. So this is what we mean by don't put yourself in dumb situations, because you will lose things like the ability to use self-defense in court. You will have things like a risk of other lives. And we're just talking the legal consequences. What about the moral responsibility? You put yourself in a dumb situation where no one had to die and you ended up shooting. Okay? Because you didn't have a right mindset or a stupid temper, you were doing something dumb. And then another human being is dead because of it. Because you acted stupid. Let's set aside legalities. Let's talk morality. Is that right? Is that morally correct? Another human being died because you put yourself in a dumb situation where you needed to draw down? That could have just been avoided. And I think this is what we have to look at when we cover these topics. Basic legal and moral responsibilities of people who choose to carry. And I'm saying that as one of the most staunch advocates of the Second Amendment. Like, I am literally on the extreme end. I don't believe in background checks. I don't believe in licenses. I don't believe in restrictions. I think that you should be able to own a tank if you can afford it. I draw the line at nuclear weapons. But if you can afford a battleship or a tank, you got the $10 million, the $20 million, and you want a battleship or a tank, and you have a place to store it, that's your business. But responsibilities. You're also going to be held accountable for any damage you do with it. But again, we come over to, so now you have the tank. Just like the gun, you have some basic moral duties and responsibilities. All right, guys, but I think that sums everything up that I wanted to cover with this. So I hope it's been informative. I'll talk to you guys next time, and let me give you guys a bicep shot before we go. Mount Bicephalus.